Start recording. Millennial writing. Whatever that means.
I've noticed a trend in writing. It seems to be getting more common over time. It's a certain type of writing that I'm trying to describe. The best term I can think of to call it is millennial writing.
Okay.
You'll find out why. Okay, imagine this. You know those tweets that are like, capitalism low-key killed our vibe and gaslit us into being okay with our bosses and landlords taking our excess value? And then it has like 250,000 likes. I'm more so just referring to the Twitter style of speaking, the tone and affectation and vocabulary. Now, have you noticed this style of writing in modern games? I'll go through some examples to shed further light. Remember the cringe Saints Row reboot or new Tales from the Borderlands? There is undeniably a certain
Borderlands
style
is cringe?
here. By the way, I'm using footage with credit from YouTube for these. All within fair use.
For some of these, the gameplay is mine.
But why on earth would I want to play these games? Why would you expect or even want anybody to play these games? Say what you will about Telltale movie games, Tales from the Borderlands was a very well-written game, with well-wrought and interesting characters. It'd be reasonable to be excited for the follow-up to that, on the basis of your enjoyment of the previous one. What you may forget is that this game isn't made by Telltale, it's Gearbox, who made Borderlands 3. Borderlands 3 is an excellent example of this style as well. In fact, the gradual collapsing quality of Borderlands writing maps onto this trend really well. Borderlands 3 had excessive pop culture references, like
I heard that it's a really good game though.
Big suck. I can just imagine the millennial writers sitting back in their room chuckling at that, a wry grin on their face for the new level of comedy they just unlocked. The main villains being streamers. It doesn't even say anything. It just has them as streamer cult leaders. Like, ooh.
Yeah, this is really problematic in the way that if you really focus on the what is in and what is hype or hip at that certain time, and you add it into a video game, which goes into development for years and years, and then you publish it with those jokes, it sounds cringe. And even it sounds at that moment cringe. Now imagine in the future, like let's say 10 years from now, people want to still play your game and read about your game or whatever, and then it has all these references that are outdated. A lot of people don't even use it anymore. Some of them don't even know what it means. It's that bad, you know, like you should not use such things in references or in places that, or things that you know that's gonna be used in years from now.
Streamers are cult leaders. How so? At least have some sort of evidence of that or present a critique.
To make it timeless, you should
None
not
of the
add
characters
these
are really
things
built
then.
up and there are no rewarding arcs. It's like the writers are entitled. They just expect that we care about these characters. The moments in the game don't carry any weight or impact.
Borderlands 3 spoilers ahead.
Maya's death was so obviously avoidable and contrived. An obnoxious character like Tiny Tina was acceptable in 2012, when we didn't know any better, but they just kept riffing on the same annoying aspects of these characters without moving on. They just can't let go of these lol so random characters. Why do I care if Atlas wins this corporate war? Apparently Maliwan is an evil corporation. Corporate assholes. But so are the guys we're fighting for. And the game just presents it as good and evil. They naturally cap it off with a girl power ending, despite how poorly they resolved the conflict between Ava and Lilith, you know, the protagonists of the story, and the brain-dead reveal of Tannis being a super powerful secret siren this whole time. And whenever they talk, they're always super verbose. They just keep talking and talking for far longer than is necessary. And if you have no clue what I'm talking about, don't worry. It's nonsense anyway. I think there's this famous post that pretty excellently sums up Borderlands writing. They can't go one line without stuffing it full of ironic observation as their form of jokes. The normal line would be like, if you can get some fuel canisters, then I can reactivate the main generator and get our shields back up. I mark the objective on your map. Versus the Gearbox line, hey buddy, great job killing those mutants and all. You're really good at that. Shooting things, that is. One problemo though. As it turns out, a bunch of monsters on this planet are gonna tear our eyes out if we don't get the shield back up. And this is just my opinion, but that's gonna suck. Not having eyes sounds terrible. Like, how am I supposed to read my collection of bodacious space babes without any flippin' eyeballs? So here's my brilliant plan that I got written on this here napkin. I won't go on. You can pause and read the rest of it, but you get the idea.
Nah, bruh.
Now,
That's why I don't read in video games. A lot of times, I love books, you guys. Like, I read books, like every month, 2 books at least, to 4 books. And I really love reading. And in video games, I don't like reading because it's such, especially in these games that are coming nowadays, it's such a pointless read, you know? It's so much of nothingness.
Everything about Borderlands 3 writing, but
I don't know
worse.
how to explain it. Like, there's no depth. There is no.
The worst thing about Gearbox is that they just don't get the memo. Are they addicted to sniffing their own farts or something? Why aren't they trying to improve their writing after literally everybody criticizes it?
I mean, everybody criticizes the story. I don't think they criticize a lot the writing in the game because not a lot of people do read everything in the game. Like you always have in RPG games a lot of notes and stuff. And I would say like 80% of streamers would just skip that and continue with the story because they think it's boring to just read it for their audience, you know. And that's why not a lot of people do read those. However, I don't think you need to read the writing. You have it in the story itself and the communication, the dialogues or monologues within the game that are enough to show you about the story or tell you what the story is about.
You are good eggs, who dis?
They assassinate the character of Reese. In fact, he's basically a different character entirely to the one from Tales. Now he's the corporate arsehole, basically taking on the exact same role as his enemy in Tales. In Borderlands 3, there was some gag about how his favorite frozen yogurt place got destroyed.
Well, that's it. Say goodbye to your favorite Frogurt stand.
Not friends, Frogurts, anything but friends, Frogurts. I mean, they give you that.
Oh, I can just imagine it. Some 30-something with an English degree paid for by their parents whose greatest trauma, besides getting trolled on Twitter, is their favorite food place which they would visit in between sessions of making PowerPoints in their Mac shutting down.
I think that's bad. Like, it's Borderlands. You expect such conversations, right? I don't think it's that bad. Like, sometimes you learn more about a character by the way they speak and what they reference.
And they brought that trauma into the game. Now, apparently they thought this frozen yogurt gag was so funny that they had to revive it for the next game as the basis for one of the characters, as if it was some beloved gag.
Why not? I don't see anything wrong in this because like, gamers are not serious. Like, we just want to have fun and we don't have to have every topic or everything too serious, especially in a Borderlands game, man. The game is all about being funny and ironic and sarcastic and doing something. Like, maybe somebody did think, oh, how did that look like, that place? So I don't see anything wrong in this.
So this Frogurt place is on Promethea, a fictional planet that looks remarkably like San Francisco. And of course it's very diverse, or rather it reflects the demographics of San Francisco. If the point of representation is to introduce new and different viewpoints, then this is achieving the exact opposite of that. It feels like these stories only represent the experiences of young, wealthy, inner-city tech people from the coastal cities of America, an extremely small niche, Twitter addicts.
Hey, Papa Girardi! I can smell your space calzones from here!
Ah, thanks! I need a new name for them!
Might also need to stop doing that problematic accent!
Yeah, I know.
A lot of the references and lingo just feel out of touch.
Miss Johnson! Did you get a cybernetic leg? That thing's straight fire.
Like, they're trying to be younger than they actually are. A lot of the language feels like 5 years out of date. And there's a certain character design. The shaved on one side and long hair swept on the other, the brightly colored hair. It's extremely common. There are also adult characters who speak like children, or just generally speak in a...
I mean, straight brown hair is extremely common. Does that make it outdated? I don't think a hairstyle is because it's common. I don't understand this
really
guy.
Condescending or patronizing tone.
While I examine this unimaginably complex and priceless alien artifact,
Nitpicking
you
at
may
its
wait
best.
outside and steal
George.
anything not nailed down.
There was the new Saints Row reboot as well. We knew it was going to be
Oh,
terrible
man.
before launch, and we weren't
No, I
surprised
didn't.
at all.
I thought it's
They
gonna
made
be
the
really
main
awesome.
characters into a bunch of broke college kids, and they're all dealing with student debt and rent and complaining about capitalism. They try to borrow some internet lingo like wage slave. They're super verbose. They do not stop haranguing the player with dialogue, and they use expletives like they're meant to be edgy, or they're just funny on their own.
Goddamn fucking shitballs on a stick with a side order of mother-loving, shit-smothered, piss-covered ass crack!
It's like they get a kick out of swearing for no reason. Also, it's super funny that characters are talking about their carbon footprint.
Your carbon footprint always matters.
So relatable, am I right, fellow millennials? People talk about that on Twitter, right? They really do talk about capitalism a lot. They don't really say much about it though. They just say the word and we're supposed to think, I don't even know, like, wow, you're really culturally aware.
I've told you before, the idols are trying to build a post-capitalist society where money is not a concept.
The original series started as a GTA clone and got progressively more wacky and outlandish. The humor was extremely crass. It recognized the absurdity and cranked it up as high as possible. It was self-aware before self-aware humor became...
I never played the first one, and I don't know what the story is about. I did try this one that came out and was broken. I couldn't play it, literally. But the thing is that I do understand what he means by these jokes, like all this excessive swearing. Even in Forspoken, we had the same situation where the main character was constantly using the F word to explain anything, any kind of frustration, without actually using more synonyms to explain it, emotion-wise. And yeah, it's so bland, and it makes you understand how, especially Americans, I would say, like that their slang and their dialect and how they speak towards each other, because it's through Twitter, you know, and this social stuff, society issues, whatnot, this is also Twitter. So, but also on other side, you have a lot of, let's say, in other media, you have sitcoms and let's say sitcoms. And a lot of times in sitcoms, you have a joke about a husband or a wife, or a husband being scared of his wife, or you have dad jokes, and you have these things. And these things are repetitive, right? They keep coming and going, but they're always funny if they're done right. It doesn't matter the essence of the joke. It's always funny when a husband makes fun of his wife to his friends or something like that. Or, you know, like these type of things. We laugh about it. We don't mean anything bad by it. And it's going to always be funny, and it's never going to be outdated. It just depends how and where you put it and how you actually say it. You know, like the representation matters.
Really tired. They certainly did make pop culture references, but like Borderlands, this style of humor was more apt in 2012. It feels like they haven't really grown since then. They've had to tone down a lot of the most vulgar elements of the humor from previous
internet got
games,
dumber.
which just doesn't work because vulgarity was the core of the humor in them. And again, we see the same character design, the Skrillex cut, the dyed hair. You see it in so many games, it's like they're reading from the same guidebook. Now, something that feels similar, but is harder to place my finger on, is the new Wolfenstein games. The New Order was alright. Wolfenstein 2 started to introduce some weirdness, like throwing their fetishes into the game. But Youngblood is where the failure of the writing becomes really apparent.
What?
It's centered around these quirky twins who get up to silly antics in between bouts of killing people. It's strange how frivolous it is with violence. Of course, that certainly isn't a new thing, but in this game, the main characters seem to delight in it. That also isn't the weird part. It's that they delight in this violence, and there is nothing really wrong with it. They're not anti-heroes, they're just regular old protagonists. And it's just silly and fun. It's strangely flippant. I mean, the New Order wasn't like that. It did have over-the-top violence, but BJ Blazkowicz was motivated by a righteous fury and rage. He never really reveled in killing or celebrated it. There's also the loud equals funny yelling. Some of the new Wolfenstein writing just
Wolfenstein Youngblood. I feel like I want to play this game. I really love when I see like references to world wars and any type of game, whether it is multiplayer FPS game or a game that is concentrated around world wars and stories. I always love it. I mean, it's a bad period, it's a bad time to remember, but at the same time, I'm fascinated by it. You know, it's fun. badly found. I don't know how to say it. See, this is the thing. You,
Feels like
you
the
never know what
writers
to
had
say
some
without sounding
issues of
wrong
their
today.
own to work on.
Everything sounds wrong.
Why is it that balls are always used as some fucking default definition of badassery?
It feels like they wanted to make a political statement that they just weren't equipped to make. High on Life is another super
Oh, don't at me, bro. Don't at me. He is the problem. This guy is actually the problem. I completely understand what he is saying, but I also, you have to know what time we live in, and everything you say, like people think they can comment on it. I'm commenting right now on someone else and not hating, but like in a negative way, like criticizing, you know. We criticize and we openly talk about it because it became so generic, so normal to do that, especially on Twitter, where you share your opinion, and people have been so sensitive about everything and nitpicking everything. Like, it's so normal now to talk about these issues. Nobody will think that you're weird or different or just whatever, you know. Snowflakes, yeah, we became such snowflakes. Like, I have nothing against High on Life. I enjoyed the game so freaking much. I understand the humor is not for everyone. For the people who love Rick and Morty, I think personally, like, if not 100% of people who love Rick and Morty would love this game, but there is a high percentage of people that would, because it's really good game. It was fun. Yeah, in a way it was like kind of cringy, like some things were repetitive, but in the majority, like overall, I had so much fun and I loved the humor. I really did.
Obvious example. It has all of the same hallmarks: overly verbose characters, unnecessary swearing as if it was funny on its own. I mean, I like Michael Cusack. Damo and Darren at the train station is one of the most quoted videos here in Australia.
What is
but
this?
man, the
was
knifey character didn't work.
Yeah, everybody
they had a
hated
cameo
the
from
knife.
Psychic Pebbles as well, who is usually absolutely hilarious. But in this game, I don't think the bit really worked. I noticed there's a certain vocabulary as well. It wouldn't be unusual to hear words such as weird or shitty. And it is weird that the dude who, well, you know what he did, is calling anyone shitty. This kind of dialogue is really common. I feel like High on Life could have done with an editor. Somebody to cut like 90% of the dialogue, only leaving the best stuff in.
No, it doesn't work like that. For example, Rick and Morty is all about talking. In so many situations, they just blab and blab and blab on and on and on, not important things. Even their commercials, like literally when you watch this one episode about, I don't know if it's called interterrestrial or whatever, like cable TV, and then there were commercials that lasted like 10 minutes or whatever, but it's a commercial and you watch the whole story and stuff and people talking, personal space, my personal space, you know, or baby legs, like this is the thing. It's such a humor. It's like that, you just listen and you don't care. Literally everything is so not important, bro. Interdimensional cable, that episode, I loved it. And it's a representation of saying stuff without saying anything and being funny by doing that. This is for people who don't want to hear blabble and blabble. They just want to get to the point. I feel like he is a bit older guy and he just wants to get to the point. He doesn't want to hear the same joke over and over again. For him, it's enough once, and he will give just a small teeny tiny giggle when he hears it, while we are going to be like laughing our ass off, you know? You're like, yeah, that was funny. And then he will move on. Nah, that's not Rick and Morty.
As of right now, it seems like they believe that annoying equals funny, similarly to loud equals funny. Destiny 2 seems to have taken on some of this writing as well. Anna Bray is starting to sound like a Borderlands character.
My security frames are overrun. Is another example of your over-promise, under-deliver attitude?
Huh. None of that sounded like, Anna, please help me. I need you. They're killing me. Ow.
A simple yes would satisfy.
So quirky and sardonic. This type of delivery sounds condescending. It reminds me of the boss from Office Space.
Yeah. If you could just go ahead and make sure you do that from now on, that would be great.
I'll be honest, I do not see the appeal. And, you know, I can't really bring up Millennial writing without at least mentioning indie Earthbound-inspired game that's secretly about depression and mental health. These tend not to have the exact same tropes, Now that I think of it, it wouldn't be unusual to find similar stuff in indie games. It's just that people in the comments are going to bring this up if you're going to talk about millennial games. So I think I'm starting to get a picture of it. The hallmarks of this style of writing that stick out to me from these and many more examples. The aforementioned vocabulary. Shitty, weird, gross, icky, yucky, yikes. My dude, my guy, y'all, and of course, decent human being. Another millennial phrase I tend to hear is, the bar is on the floor. It's funny how a lot of these phrases are kind of childish. I'm not sure whether they're trying to be condescending and infantilizing to others, or whether they are themselves infantilized. They so often sound passive-aggressive. Another millennial phrase that annoys me is do better or be better. Again, talking down to you. It's insanely condescending. It just seems like a failure to grow up. A lot of the humor seems like it's from the people who've struggled to grow up since 2012. It seems like there are
what if I don't want to grow up? Huh? What about that?
emotionally stunted. And this is probably just me reading into it. And I see a lot of crossover with there being emotionally stunted and all of the pop culture references. It seems like some kind of identity.
No, he's reading into it. That's not me, okay? He's reading into it. I understand his frustration with, like, he loves a really serious video game that leaves an impact on you. He would like to have a video game that is similar to a Mandalorian TV series episode or whatever. Like, he wants something, he wants a Game of Thrones thing, you know? He wants something that will, like, the writing will leave an impact on him, a game that he will talk about for the next 5 to 10 years. It's not gonna happen. Those were back in the days, like, yeah, maybe Elden Ring, but not because of, maybe because of the story a bit, but mostly the action and the characters. But to be honest, I think that it's very hard nowadays to make a video game that will leave such an impact on you. It's very hard. These are usually the type of game of the year game, you know? Mostly games come and go now. Like, it just, I know the laziness behind it. I understand what he means, but he should not read into it so freaking much. Honestly, I feel like people who read into it are people who think themselves lacking in aspects. Like, he has a problem with himself not being able to enjoy this silly fun because he thinks it's too childish, and he's a grown-up, and he doesn't want to feel childish because he's a grown man, and he doesn't want to feel like that, and it's condescending to him. So he has a problem with it, not us. You know, he is the one who needs to change and not ask for games to change, or just don't play them.
That they're trying to cling to, that they can't let go of. I mean, Fallout 2, all the way.
Why would I have to let go? Why is it a clinging to something? For games are for children and for young adults. And yes, the older people, first of all, they don't have as much time to play video games, but they also like to play video games, and they still enjoy it. It still feels like they are younger. They just want to feel like they belong, and they do. Why is it clinging? Why is it a problem? Why do they have to let go?
Way back then was full of pop culture references, but I don't know, back then being a quote-unquote nerd was kind of a subculture of its own. It wasn't really something people aimed to be. It's just a label people got slapped with for the activities and subculture they gravitated towards. It was to make fun.
Back in the day, people who were called nerds were bullied, right? People who were called nerds, gamers and whatnot, they were no-lifers living in the basement, or like literally with their parents, and no girls would like to date such guys. And now it's different. Now girls and guys are proud to be called nerds. So I don't think you should go back. Actually, today it's better. Even girls playing video games today, it's so much more acceptable than back in the day. I don't think there were girl nerds back in the day.
fun of them. Now,
or even if they were, they
nerd
were
is
not
like
saying
a
it.
market demographic. It seems that being a self-admitted nerd and being obsessed with pop culture is based purely around cynical consumption nowadays. And obviously nothing epitomizes this more than the Funko Pop, which is like a religious icon for millennials. The pop culture obsession seems to stem from an inability or refusal to grow up. The kinds of references that were
Refusal
funny
to grow up.
in
It's accepting the child in you.
2007 and tolerable in 2012 are just embarrassing now. There are other hallmarks, like letting you pet the doggo, because that's a Twitter account, right? Having quips everywhere that undermine dramatic moments. Having an easy mode called Tell Me a Story or Story Mode, letting you skip bosses or parts of the gameplay, making the game easier if you fail too many times. I also just wanted to mention a few tweets because people
Hardcore
speak
gamer,
like
this guy,
this
bro, I
on
told
Twitter,
you.
and I think that's where it comes from. And once you see enough of this, you start to recognize this style when you see it in media. Tuesday, the day you realize that nothing can stop you, because you are a magic skeleton packed with meat and animated with electricity and imagination. You have a cave in your face full of sharp bones and 5 tentacles at the end of each arm. You can do anything, magic skeleton. Between Bernie, my ex-wife, the tenant from hell, and general chump fuckery, this has been a cromulent fuck crustable of a day. Tommy needy drinky. Kanye is a teeny weeny
I don't know if it's the way he's reading this, but this is hilarious.
little baby bitch muffin. What you'll notice is the playground insults mixed with swearing, and they're talking in a baby language, like with these invented words that they just came up with. Beyond that, there's all the references to student debt. So relatable, am I right, fellow millennials? Ironic that the people who talk about representing broader viewpoints and life experiences seem to make the same few jokes that only appeal to a tiny group of people who are like them.
No, it's not a tiny group of people. That's where you're wrong. You are the tiny group of people. You are the, like, literally, you are the type of gamers that wants a video game that they talk about for the next decade in their life, a game that they spend 3 years finishing and completing because it's just hardcore mode and there is no story mode or easy mode for casual gamers. You don't want to accept that there are casual gamers who will pay $70 to enjoy a story in a video game, because in your opinion, there are no good stories to be told in video games nowadays. That's not true. That is not true. There are. Not plenty, but there are.
Degree in English from major coastal cities of the USA. The student debt thing is also meant to be their social commentary. And that brings us to the juiciest part, the politics. A game like Saints Row keeps referencing capitalism, as if it was offering some sort of critique, but it's not really saying anything. A lot of these games seem to just reference political events or social issues because it's like they feel obliged to. They do these political things, not because they have anything to say, but because they think they have to say something. This is because of Twitter and just social media in general, well, at least partly. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, the complaints about how they're politicizing video games were coming to a head. We need to stop politicizing this escapist hobby. Then some Redditors from a place named Gaming Circle Jerk took these complaints and ran with them. They've been telling their singular joke for like 6 years now. Actually, Chud, games have always been political, then showing examples of old games and how they made some political statement.
They did, but the way they represent the political is not through the dialogue, but through the whole story. They emphasize it through, like, it's in between, you know, it's in between the line, and it's only for people who understand and want to read into it. It's not shoved into your face. And that's, for example, what I want to say, like one of those games, BioShock, for example. Like BioShock, the amount of things, the symbolism behind it. Atomic Heart, a game that is coming out next month. I don't think that it's actually this month, the end of this month. I don't think that game is gonna shove it into your face about what it's about. You will have to understand through it and go through the whole story to figure out some things.
They've been telling their singular joke for like 6 years now. Actually, Chud, Games have always been political, then showing examples of old games and how they made some
showing
political
Bioshock and
statement.
Call of Duty
Every meme
and
since then
Fallout.
has been some variant
Has
of
been.
le gamers, le politics. It's also paired with the statement that all art is political, and games, as art, are making a political statement, even if they don't overtly comment on anything. Saying nothing is a sign that you tacitly affirm the status quo. You aren't fighting hard enough against capitalism if you aren't speaking out against it. And it seems that they've reached game devs with this message. I think it's a common enough sentiment that many game devs feel obliged to say something, to make a statement about politics, even when they don't really have anything of value to say. And it shows. Oftentimes these political allegories and references to capitalism just feel phoned in, like in Saints Row. It isn't really saying anything, it's just making the references because I guess it looks like that's what people want when you look at social media. Am I right? Do my moots on the Bird app agree with this? We talk about this all the time, same with Borderlands. It's maybe trying to make a statement about evil corporations.
Corporate asshat.
But you fight for corporations the whole time. And I just want to take a moment to compare the capital P politics in games versus how old games would present political issues. In all those older games, it was more of an idea that was presented. It was often aware of the nuance, and it didn't force your opinion on the matter. It'd perhaps present you with a choice and an ethical quandary to bring you to question your own beliefs. It respected the player's intelligence. Of course, the writers of those games had intent. They would frame things in such a way that it made their ideology seem favorable. But it'd never force your hand. And it never felt like they were trying to force any message. The political message that could be gleaned from the game arises naturally as a result of the setting. Contrary to what Redditors claim, Fallout was not created as a political allegory. It was, first of all, a dumb, absurdly violent, ridiculously bleak game with crazy guns and mutants. There were of course ethical quandaries and political dilemmas presented as part of the setting that could be applied to the contemporary world. It never portrayed communism favorably. It didn't really say much of anything about it. It was mostly focused on America and American culture, and any of the critiques rose out of that setting. Now compare it to the politics in current games. It often feels like a cynical reference to current thing. It's often things which do not suit the setting. It never explores any ideas in depth. It simply tells you things, rather than presenting something and allowing you to think about it. I think that's the crux of it. It's about respecting the player's intelligence, allowing you to work things out on your own, to choose for yourself, to come to your own conclusion. Of course, we can't have people making their own choice nowadays. They might make the wrong one. I think condescending sums it up perfectly. They think you're stupid. They're also kind of pretentious. A lot of this political writing presents the most basic opinions and acts like you've never heard them before, like they just blew your mind, like it's something revolutionary. Now, why did millennial writing rise in the first place? I legitimately think it is Twitter. Look, for a business's continued survival, it needs to adapt constantly. When you stop growing, you start dying. So you need to look at current trends. What is an easy way to see current trends? Why, the way everyone communicates, social media. I think that writers, devs, and producers are getting their idea of what constitutes current trends from Twitter, which I think is really misguided for the simple fact that Twitter does not represent broader society. Most of what you'll hear on Twitter comes from a very small, very vocal minority. And hey, for a while the FBI was basically deciding who is and isn't allowed to have a voice on that site. I think that producers should look elsewhere to get an idea of broader society, somewhere besides social media. It only elevates fringe voices. I guess this does kind of destroy the whole argument that Twitter is just a private company which doesn't really control much of public discourse. Twitter, for a private company, holds an extreme amount of power over public dialogue, and it's the same with every social media site. I have to say, it was pretty funny to me seeing Unishek, the community manager for Halo Infinite, borrow some of the cynical and condescending language from Gaming Circle Jerk, only to get screenshotted and roasted on the site himself. It was hilarious to see that backfire, I will admit. So, in all, I guess the advice I'd give to producers is the same advice I'd give to everybody. Unplug, shut off social media for a bit, live in the real world, and don't be so condescending, and get to the point. Please subscribe, thank you all so very much.
Okay, so what I think, Like some points he said were right. I already shared my opinion about the majority of the things, but I want to say one more thing. The problem with video games today, it's not their problem. It's just basically, if a game is not talking about the past and not talking about the future, then a game is stuck in the present. And today's generation is very lucky to live in a world with no conflict. Yes, of course, there are countries here and there in conflict, and there are wars everywhere, and there's a lot of shit happening, but not really in America, right? And a lot of these developers are from America. So this generation, they cannot really relate. For example, I can relate. I'm 30 years old, but I can relate that my parents were in a war. I can relate that I grew up while listening to them talking about things like that. But however, new generation with their mothers and fathers that are young, they didn't go through any real difficulties. Maybe from their grandmother and grandfather, and they can hear about it and talk about it, but they really cannot relate, and they really cannot. So what can they talk about in a video game that is set in the present? Of course, what problems and things that are really important for them, it's this social media. Everything, you can find it on Twitter. Everything that they have too much time. Basically, they didn't go through a lot of struggles. They are having an easy life, and they have so much time, and that's why some video games that are surrounding that era or that period have a difficulty in expressing anything of value. And they're gonna go with the politics, of course, because they like conflict, and every game needs a conflict, right? Every game needs a good side, bad side, or medium side, or whatever, like to be in the middle, and they have to talk about it. So what are they gonna talk about? I don't know. Trending topics from Twitter, because they don't really have those issues. And if they bring something more, hey, yo, it's a problem. If it's not politics and if it's a social issue, then yeah, and that's very hard to talk about. And everyone is a snowflake today, you know, so you have as a game developer to be really careful of sharing your own opinion about something, because yeah, you can get dragged real quick.
For watching, and goodbye. You can do anything, Magic Skeleton.
I don't know. I love his laugh. I love his cynical laugh. Like, he reminds me of Donkey a bit. That was fun.